Something happened to the human brain right around 2012 that has literally never happened before in the entire history of our species. It wasn't a disease, it wasn't a war, it was this massive, unconsented, totally unprecedented neurological experiment conducted on the entire global population. And the crazy thing is, its long-term consequences, they're still unfolding right now. Welcome to this explainer. We're diving deep into an urgent investigation of what social media actually does to our neural architecture. The stakes here literally could not be higher. Right around this exact year, 2012, epidemiologists started noticing something deeply, deeply alarming. Mental health metrics for an entire generation just abruptly plummeted. Rates of anxiety, depression, loneliness, sleep disorders, attention problems, they all just started rising across the developed world with this terrifying speed and consistency. And the timing? It correlated perfectly with the mass adoption of smartphones and social media. Okay, let's really dive into this. The average person now spends about 2.5 hours every single day in these digital spaces. And for teenagers, that number is often double. To put that into perspective, over a year, that is more time than we spend on almost any other waking activity. But we have to realize these platforms are not just neutral tools. They are environments specifically engineered by behavioral scientists and neuroscientists to capture and absolutely hold human attention. And here's the thing. This exploitation wasn't an accident. It was the explicit design goal. Just listen to this admission from former Facebook president Sean Parker back in 2017. He flat out confirmed that they knowingly built a product to exploit a vulnerability in human psychology. They actively wanted to consume as much conscious attention as structurally possible. We have quite literally handed over our cognitive autonomy to companies that just view our attention as a commodity to be mined. Section 1, the dopamine slot machine hijack. That admission from Parker is just staggering. We're talking about the deliberate exploitation of the human brain here. So how exactly does this hijack work on a neurological level? What is literally happening inside our heads the moment we open these apps? Well, to understand this, we've got to shatter a massive cultural myth. Pop culture tells us that dopamine is the pleasure chemical, but it's not. Dopamine is actually the brain's motivational engine. It gets released in anticipation of a potential reward, in that moment of wanting, seeking, and uncertainty. So the chemical spike doesn't actually happen when you see your likes. It happens in that uncertain split second just before the screen loads. Wow, okay, that changes everything. Because that means the whole pull to refresh gesture operates on the exact same behavioral conditioning mechanism as a casino slot machine. It pays out on a variable ratio schedule, meaning it's totally random and unpredictable. It gives you just enough reward to maintain hope, but not enough to ever become predictable. It is literally the most powerful form of behavioral conditioning ever identified, creating these habits that are extraordinarily resistant to breaking. Every single refresh is basically a spin of the handle. Which brings us to Section 2, rewiring the teenage brain. While this mechanism obviously affects all of us, there is a specific developmental window where this technology inflicts the most profound, lasting damage. We really need to look closely at what this environment does to adolescents. And this is where the timing of this whole neurological experiment becomes a total tragedy. You see, the human brain is not actually fully developed until age 25. The prefrontal cortex, which is the exact region responsible for impulse control, long-term thinking, and emotional regulation, that is the very last part to mature. So social media was introduced exactly when the adolescent brain is at its absolute peak state of neurological vulnerability and plasticity. Exactly. The crucial point here is that adolescent brains are already evolutionarily wired to prioritize social belonging as an absolute survival need. The threat of social rejection activates the exact same neural circuits as physical pain. So what social media platforms do is weaponize the sensitivity. They take this really fragile need for peer approval and transform it into a continuous, public, numerically ranked competition. Every single post becomes a bid for survival, and the brain simply has no off switch for this kind of environment. The epidemiological data absolutely proves the fallout from this. Adolescents spending more than 3 hours a day on these platforms are showing severely higher rates of depression, anxiety, and sleep destruction. And just look at the disparity here. Adolescent girls are disproportionately affected. The social comparison dynamics of these highly visual platforms interact violently with existing body image vulnerabilities. The mental health collapse among girls right after 2012 tracks the rise of these platforms with chilling precision. Okay, moving on to Section 3, the death of deep attention. The emotional toll here is undeniable, but we also have to really examine the cognitive toll. Attention isn't just about being productive. It is the fundamental filter through which we experience reality. So what is this constant engineered stimulation actually doing to our basic ability to just focus? Well, the human attention system, which relies on the prefrontal, parietal, and anterior cingulate cortices, evolved to sustain focus and basically filter out irrelevant data. But social media is an environment of infinite interruption. Every notification, every single scroll is a massive context switch. And research shows that after just one interruption, it takes the brain an average of 23 minutes to fully return to a state of deep focus. In an environment of constant pings, deep focus is literally never reached. And the really devastating reality of that constant switching is that continuous partial attention trains the brain to remain fragmented. People who consume high volumes of this content actually show structural shifts. We're talking reduced working memory capacity, increased baseline distractibility, and a seriously diminished ability to filter out the noise. The neural architecture is altered. And the craziest part, the damage persists even when the screen is completely turned off, which completely compromises memory formation, right? Because deep encoding requires sustained attention. The fast-paced scanning of 15-second videos and endless feeds just demands shallow, rapid processing. The research is super clear here. You can process a vast amount of information during a 2-hour doom scroll, but your brain will retain almost none of it. We are basically gorging on information while completely cognitively starving. That brings us to Section 4. The profound loneliness paradox. This is arguably the deepest, most tragic irony of the entire digital era. Remember, these platforms were sold to the world on the promise of human connection and building a global community. It really is the defining paradox of our time. Loneliness is now literally a declared public health crisis. 1 in 3 adults feels lonely regularly. And young adults, the ones who have literally never known a world without this technology, they report the highest rates of loneliness of any age group alive. How is that even neurologically possible? The biological answer comes down to exactly how we're wired. Genuine social bonds require face-to-face interaction, eye contact, and shared physical presence. That real-world friction triggers oxytocin, the bonding hormone, and causes literal neural synchronization between 2 nervous systems. Social media strips all of that away. It provides the visual appearance of connection with zero neurological substance. It is essentially social junk food. It spikes your blood sugar, but leaves you entirely malnourished. Right. And it forces a complete identity crisis. The version of you that exists online is this curated, optimized performance. It's not a real person. As adolescents pour their energy into managing this digital persona, the gap between who they actually are and who they are performing for the algorithm just widens and widens. This breeds a profound psychological distress. Performing yourself for an audience makes it terrifyingly easy to forget who you even are when the audience stops watching. Let's look at Section 5, reclaiming our neural architecture. The severity of this neuroscience cannot be overstated, but the human brain is not a lost cause. The exact mechanisms that allowed these platforms to rewrite our attention can be harnessed to take it back. The science of recovery is entirely within our grasp. We are not powerless victims of our technology. The foundational rule of neuroplasticity guarantees that a brain shaped by its environment can be consciously, deliberately reshaped. The attention that's been shattered into fragments, it can be carefully rebuilt. The digital substitutes we've accepted for connection can absolutely be replaced with real human friction. But none of this happens by accident. It requires aggressive awareness and unyielding intention. The companies that built this architecture, they understand your dopamine systems, your social vulnerabilities, and your attention spans way better than you do. They are banking on your passive participation. The only real defense is conscious choice. Will you choose to treat your own mind as something worth protecting?